G'day, mate, and here we are, 2 months later, 24 episodes down, and a season of Australian Survivor is in the books. This one, Heroes vs. Villains, and I'm here to give you guys a breakdown and review of this season that we all just watched because, wow. And just overall thoughts before getting into this juicy meat tray that was this season. I very much enjoyed my experience with this season, and this felt like a revival of Australian Survivor. Depending on how you felt about Brains versus Brawn, we potentially have had 3 seasons in a row that were pretty lackluster for Australian Survivor, and this season I did not have much confidence that anything was going to change. Whether it's the over-the-top and obnoxious winner edits that get thrown into our faces very early on, the bloated season lengths, and pretty bad twists, I was nervous. But I am very happy to say that I very much enjoyed this season from beginning to end. A lot. I'll obviously get into why in my review, but this season hit the ground running and maintained my interest until the very last episode, to where I still wasn't sure who was going to win going into Final Tribal Council, which is very, very hard to do for modern seasons of any Survivor. And even with some massive edits given to certain players and some not so fun rounds towards the end game, I was still enthralled with this season and left this 24 episode bunch very satisfied. And my last note, if you guys enjoy this video or any of my videos, please subscribe, leave a like, leave your thoughts in the comments about this season. With that out of the way, why did I truly enjoy this season so much? Let's find out in my review of Australian Survivor, Heroes vs. Villains. Going to this premiere, I really don't know what my expectations were. A shaky at best mixed cast with a heroes versus villains label thrown onto it so they can promote George and Haley, and me not having the best experience watching Australian Survivor seasons as they're airing. Like, my only 2 seasons live were All Stars and Blood vs. Water, so I have really bad taste in my mouth from this. So even with some hype coming in for the season, I was gonna be very cautious because it's Australian Survivor. They aren't always the best with their editing. But the season genuinely surprised me, and it starts with this premiere. Australian Survivor hits the ground running, and by that I mean the villains hit the ground running, because nobody cares about what the heroes are doing the first 3 episodes. But King George is back, and he makes a tight alliance with Jackie and Angeli, who both go home by the end of the premiere, and George is greeted with a massive gash on his forehead after episode 1. So quite the start for the king. The 2-episode arc of Michael was such a surreal one. I mean, that man was here to play poorly, I might add, but play nonetheless, and seriously had a hard-on for King George, like wanting to become the Kingslayer, I guess, only to realize he actually has no allies. And thanks to Shawnee stamping her foot to keep George, the Spice Girls were created, with Shawnee, Liz, and George. Michael said goodbye, and while he won't be memorable in the season, this first batch of episodes was fun to see the rise and massive fall of Michael. Then we move to Cookiegate. I mean, you know, when cookies are involved, Australian Survivor is in its peak form, and this was no exception. Villains win the cookies, they carry them anywhere and everywhere, and Mimi gets caught red-handed in the middle of the night searching through the cookies for an idol or an advantage, whatever it is. And if you thought that was the actual peak of the episode, oh, you'd be so wrong. 2 words. Cookie, idol. One of my favorite pre-merge storylines that has ever existed in any season of Survivor, US or international. It's Simon finding himself a little thing. Just a thing inside the cookie jar. No paper, no notes, no inscription. Just a thing. Kind of circular, kind of shaped like a cookie. But it's Simon, and Simon knows all. And so he tells us with 100% confidence, it's an idol. Spoiler alert, it's not an idol. I mean, the edit does him so dirty every single confessional he's in, and every sign pointing into it not being an idol, he keeps going on claiming that it's an idol. We get the Simon and Jordy ass crack moment, and little old Simon has a master plan in store. That hard-on that Michael had to take out George, crank that up times maybe 10, and that's Simon's lust to take down King George. So when the vote is ready to fall unanimously onto poor old Stevie, instead, Simon wants to get him and Jordy to vote for George, play his idol on Stevie, and send the king home. And we all know how that would have gone, so thank God for Jordy. Jordy is the one. The overall wearing Joker from Blood vs. Water saved Simon from such a terrible, terrible blunder. But that's probably not even the top 3 blunder from Simon this season, so we'll get to them. Just wait. We'll get to a lot more with the cookie idol later. For now, Shawnee and Liz decide that they want to flip the vote onto Mimi instead of Stevie for some reason. So, sure, Mimi is sent home, I guess, which is cool because I like Stevie, but I don't know why it happened. And I guess we finally have to talk about the Heroes Tribe, and I want to talk as little as I possibly can about Rogue, one of the most unlikable Survivor figures, and just as easily one of the worst players in Survivor. Who cares? Rogue sucks. Rogue goes home. But as we sit here, the Meat Tray Alliance, as it's called, continues to dominate on the Heroes Tribe, which is also why the Heroes are kind of boring. A dominant alliance of men who basically have their pick of who they want to take out, with Ben and Jerry being the easy targets. Until Haley gets brought up as a potential target, potentially blindsiding the Queen and the only winner on the tribe. But a non-elimination sends Jerry to the villain, so that's kind of ruined. But this actually plays a major factor as Jerry is able to see what the villains are actually all about and is treated like a human being, more than just an outsider who are willing to pick him off on the hero side. And obviously is very much more willing to align with people who want him here over those boring people on the other side, and Haley. We move to one of the closest challenges I've ever seen, leads to a villains tribal council where it seems to be Simon versus George, but instead they call a temporary truce and take out the middleman in Sarah unanimously, I guess. Who cares? But now we move to one of the best episodes of Modern Survivor I've ever watched. Just insane all the way through, and I'm sure you all know how crazy it was, but I'm still here to savor and appreciate how fucking insane it was. I mean, from how much the show promoted this episode for days leading up to it, just shoving it down our throats, you'd be hoping it's gonna be amazing, and I'm happy to say that it definitely delivered. First of all, Jerry moves back onto the heroes. Villains lose immunity. Duh, that's the basics of it all. Jordy ends up portraying Simon, his best mate on the island, by telling everyone about Simon's cookie idol. So the goal is to completely just blindside Simon with his perceived idol in his pocket. But when we head to Tribal, they decide to throw us in an individual immunity challenge in the middle of Tribal for some reason, which is wild, but Simon literally destroys everyone, which means, oh no, Simon is safe. It's time to pivot, and pivot they did. And with that pivot comes the peak of King George, in my opinion. He completely sells Jordy down the river by exposing that he betrayed Simon, reveals his own idol, which yes, George found an idol earlier in the season, I just didn't care to mention that until now, plays his idol just to ensure he doesn't go home and spook Simon, all while threatening Simon to play his cookie idol onto Stevie, as the entire rest of the tribe presumably has voted for Stevie as the backup to Simon. So either let Stevie go home, his destiny mate, or play his idol for Stevie and build some trust, a complete lose-lose web that George has wound up and tied Simon in. And in the end, Simon decides to not play his idol, letting Stevie out to the wolves to protect himself for one more round. But in actuality, it wasn't just Simon tied in George's web, it was everyone except the Spice Girls, as the trio throw a minority vote split onto Frasier, which you may be wondering, who is Frasier? Hell if I know, and we'll move on, blindsiding everyone, keeping Stevie in the game, who physically just watched Simon willingly let him go home, breaking his trust, and jumping onto the George train, all while Simon and Jordy sit at the bottom of the tribe, not even aligned with each other at this point. And that was a masterclass and the highlight of the season for me. Such incredible maneuvering, making George 12 steps ahead of everyone with his 4D chess moves. Just having his way throughout. I mean, this tribe let him gain his footing by not voting him out early, and they very, very soon have and will regret that decision, because Hurricane George is just getting started. Back to our good old Heroes pit stop. We all love it. Yay. I mean, who would have guessed Ben and Jerry are the targets? But Ben actually finds an idol, so things could actually get pretty spicy. And Ben brings a breath of fresh air to break up this majority alliance. In the end, his idol play just leads to Sharni going out, who I don't care about, so whatever. But oh my god, an auction and a tribe swap? US Survivor could never. It was a breath of fresh air to see a tribe swap happen and shake up the dynamics of each tribe. Each tribe having heroes up 5-3 in numbers versus the villains feels like it could be a steamroll, but you don't know what kind of villains you're dealing with here, so stay tuned. The completely outmatched new heroes lose, who would have thunk, but with a wild Shawnee with an idol in the minority, you know who really has the power on this tribe. It's George, and it's Shawnee. The "I don't think God likes Paige" quote is unironically one of my favorite things ever said on Survivor, and thanks to a correct idol read and Jerry flipping, Paige is sent home, who actually sucks as a person outside of the show, but I'm not going to get into that because I'm talking about inside the show. But inside the show, she also annoyed me greatly. I hope to never see you again, Paige. Bye-bye. And I very much enjoyed the George and Shawnee power trip that they had after this vote. I mean, they are eating it up, and I am here for it. Episode 10 is a wild roller coaster of emotions for me, so stick with me here. To rewind, George casually kinda just won $60,000 at the auction that only Liz and Shawnee know about. Shawnee casually got another idol, and now back to the present, Liz has an idol, and the Spice Girls are thriving even while on separate tribes. Speaking of different tribes, this episode's especially, but for most of the pre-merge this season, the cross-tribal communications before, during, and after the challenges were all pretty major factors in things that happened throughout this season. Usually the challenges are the most skippable of Survivor episodes, but for this season, you literally can't skip the challenges, whether it's George trying to connect with Haley before they reunite, the blatant whispering and talking on the mats to get some tea or start some drama, or my favorite of the three, the old classic idol exchanges, which happen in this episode twice. Because the cookie plot idol is about to hit overdrive as Simon is desperate to want to fit in with the cool kids, so the heroes decide to force Simon to give him his idol. But no, Simon has a better plan. He'll not only give them his idol, they will give their idol to Flick, so Flick can idol out King George. That, along with the fucked up Batman quote that the show left in, along with the "oh yeah, the idol is literally not real," is just perfect television throughout. Let's not forget the fact that Liz manages to convince Shawnee to give Jordy her idol as well, because they are gonna get targeted. So now Jordy and Liz both have idols, while the cookie idol gets passed around at the exact same time. It's an absolute clusterfuck, and I love it. Like, I know I just talked a lot and dumped a lot of info you probably already know about if you're watching this video, but I genuinely just love this entire sequence, and the pre-merge of the season gave me everything I wanted, and this part right here, some of these like little dynamics, might have been some of my favorite parts of the entire season. Because post-idol swap, Jordy and Liz threaten Haley and Nino with their idols to vote for Sam, while Jordy secretly doesn't think they'll need to play their idols at all. And it's the Jordy downfall that is really heartbreaking to me, but so good at the same time. Sean coming up with the last minute switch up to pin all their votes onto Jordy, just in case if he doesn't play his idol, and Jordy's game is unraveled, who genuinely was so good this season. Obviously not the most beloved figure in his first appearance for the Joker, but he just felt so much more mature this season, being the literal median for Simon and George on the original Villains tribe, where they were the little kids that kept fighting on the playground. I would have loved to see Jordy stick around a bit longer, but I also feel like this conclusion for him, giving everyone a much fonder final memory of him when you look back on the show and him as a character, is honestly a perfect ending for him. And if he comes back, I think it would be great. I'd love to see him coming back. But if he doesn't come back, I think this is a great ending for the Joker. But I mean, it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. Like George and Shawnee find out everything that happened, Jordy going home, Liz herself having an idol, and the cookie idol being in Flick's hands instead of Simon's. So leave it up to George and Shawnee being petty and casually throwing the immunity challenge, not caring who knows that they throw it, just throwing it out in the open to show the heroes that they mean business. Essentially leading one of Flick, Matt, or Ben to their death. Like, I'm sorry, but the Spice Girls alliance in the pre-merge, we aren't going to talk about what happened in the post-merge, is one of my favorite alliances and one of the most invested I've ever been in a trio in a long time watching Survivor. And this will lead us to the Cookie Idol conclusion, at least the physical version, where Flick and Matt give so little a shit about Ben that they don't even show him the idol, where he's the only person in the entire game that knew that that cookie idol was just a piece of wood. And of course, the villains know that nobody cares about Ben for some reason and will throw the votes onto him. Ben's face when he finally gets to see the idol is one of the most heartbreaking but riveting things I've seen. Just the look of defeat, knowing that these goobers really thought that that was a legit idol. And Ben is unfortunately sent home at the hands of the cookie idol, which makes it so full circle. It's chef's kiss. A tragic end for Ben, who I really did enjoy this season. I mean, low-key Ben for second chances. I mean, I'd love to see this man get a fair shake for once. I mean, the dude who was completely loyal to a fault for the heroes when he had every right to betray them because they did not give a shit about him. But he just stayed loyal, so justice for Ben. But here we go. I've talked about the cookie idol long enough. It's time for its coronation. Oh my god. That smug Simon gave Sean a fake idol to give to Flick, a 5D chess move to dupe the heroes and save Simon. Oh my god. He's a genius. But now it's all coming crashing down. His master plan has been foiled. He's been caught. What will he do? Only none of that happened, and Simon is just as shocked, if not more shocked, that his idol was a random piece of wood. But that's not what everyone else thinks, and perception is reality. And my perception is Simon is fucked. And of course, just to add the icing on top, the villains throw the challenge, setting up Simon for his own swan song until an unlikely group of four came together. Sam, Nina, Liz, and David, all ready to... Wait. Who are you? Who is David? Who is this random rugby player that they threw onto the season 12 episodes in? What? And he wants to lead the charge to take out Haley, the only winner? What is happening? Oh my god. Oh, it's a non-elimination episode. Oh my damn it. I mean, whatever. At least we get the Liz mutiny and the Spice Girls are reunited. But what just happened? But unfortunately, the Spice Girls aren't as tight-knit as they have been in the past. And let me be honest, I'm gonna rant here because the audacity of Shawnee and Liz to blindly trust Flick to the point where they would rather take out Stevie than Flick. I mean, like, George has one of the largest egos I've ever seen in my life, but he is in the complete right here. Flick has zero loyalty and owes zero loyalty to you. So that makes it even more fucking frustrating when they get to the point at Tribal where Liz threatens to play her idol onto Flick just because. So George is literally backed into a corner, and Stevie, poor old Stevie, who was so amazing this season, gets voted out as a contingency plan. Like, this is my love letter to Stevie. I love you, Stevie. He was so amazing on the second go-around, and I was so devastated he didn't make Merge. I love the Shiz as much as the next person, but this move and this episode pissed me off so much because it made no sense and will instantly backfire, as you will see once we get to the post-merge of the season. And like I just said, that's just the half of it. Such an exciting pre-merge that I love to watch from beginning to end, but I'm not going to stall anymore because we have all of these people coming together to conclude such an insane season of Survivor. Let's get into the post-merge of Australian Survivor heroes versus villains. The ranting's not going to stop just because we made the merge, because who would have guessed Flick scurries on back to the heroes and just duh. It was annoying because Shawnee and Liz act so shocked and so hurt that Flick would possibly flip back to the heroes like that wasn't the most obvious plan that ever existed, just so she could cover her own ass. And maybe those three got along great and we just didn't see it, but at least from a game perspective, it was moronic and made no sense and was probably my least favorite part of this entire season, if I'm going to be honest. But let's move to the actual merge because there's a lot happening here despite my frustrations and what it may look like at first glance, because the numbers are simply 8-4, the heroes and Simon versus the villains and Jerry. So you're probably thinking this is going to be a snooze, but you'd be so silly because this is a great season of Survivor. This ain't no damn hero story. It's the villains' time to shine. And George gets to work. He goes to work on Simon, trying to get the season-long rivals onto the same side for a change. And then leveraging his connections, he tried his best forming with Haley and Matt in the pre-merge. and all of a sudden, we might have just found a new majority in this game. And spoiler alert, I think we have. And thanks to Simon, Matt, and Haley flipping, Liz's idol play on Shawnee just to be sure, and David trying his best Benji impersonation only to fall flat on his face, the vigilantes are created, and David is sent home. And during this merge phase, I do want to give some spotlight to most of the players who make it this far. But for David, I do not know who you're referring to, so we're gonna move on. Probably the least notable episode in my eyes here. It's pretty self-explanatory with the vigilantes being in complete control now, and they take out Flick because she was a little silly and didn't join the fun side. And Flick was fine, too kind of boring this season if I'm being honest, didn't really do much and kind of goes out in a whimper here. But overall, I'm probably only going to remember her this season because of Simon's fake idol goof. But I mean, come on now. This season wasn't going to be boring for long because the power might be starting to shift. Simon is Simon, and if you know anything about Simon, he loves himself some idols, real or fake. And when Sean finally reveals his idol that he's been holding on to for like years, Simon is instantly on board to flip and ready to make some magic happen. Add on a Nina idol find and Simon immunity win, and I'm no math guy, but if you have 3 people in the minority with 2 ways to protect them, that's a 66% chance of straight up guessing correctly and having your way. Not only that, but Haley Leak, the only winner on the season, has already told you that they are not splitting the votes and are throwing all of the votes onto Sam. Bingo! That's what you needed, on top of Sam having a gut feeling that he's getting the votes tonight. So, according to my calculations, they couldn't possibly mess this up.
I would like to play it for myself.
We have to play it for you.
Oh my god, how'd you mess this up? How'd you mess this up? It's actually laughable. I hope that 6-pack was worth losing $500,000, Sam. Just one of those situations where every single break goes the way of the heroes here. They basically controlled all the power aside from that one little disruption in which they will mess it up. And that's exactly what they did. And that's just great television, and you can't tell me I'm wrong about that. But it wasn't going to be sunshine and rainbows forever for the Spice Girls, or should I say the Shiz, in which George overhears and suddenly realizes that Shawnee and Liz are more loyal to each other than to George himself. It's not a top 3, it's the final 2, and the final 2 is going to be Shiz. Which, I mean, like, first of all, duh, but second of all, this is George we're talking about. George. And you know he is not down for the Shiz. And you could never, ever convince me that George isn't one of the most entertaining players that has ever played Survivor. His little scurries around camp to gather all the votes to pull a blindside onto Shawnee was just so much fun here. It was peak television. And even though I was looking directly into the barrel of an unfortunate fate, an unfortunate slaughter here, and with an idol in Shawnee's pocket too, oh, it makes it so much worse to see the Shawnee blindside actually go through with the Shantha music playing while it's happening. It's tragic. And I am here to give Shawnee her flowers, because after 3 seasons of just constantly bringing a smile to millions, potentially millions, not sure how big Australian audiences, but regardless, she is so amazing and makes any scene or season better if she is on our TV screens. She was born for this, and it's a shame that this is numerically her worst placing game, even though it was one of the more fun journeys of the 3 for Shawnee. She is one of the figureheads of Australian Survivor for me, and for many, many other people, and it hurt so bad seeing this George train come hurling at her with nothing we could do to stop it. Shawnee is a blessing, an icon, a star, and that I will never take for granted. And if she can be our first 3-time Australian Survivor player, why not make her the first 4-timer someday? Like, please. I will never be mad if Shawnee is on the season. But the last thing I will also say on the Shawnee and George topic was the online discourse after this move was actually really gross to me. You may not like George as a character. He's very polarizing. You may love Shawnee as a character. She's very likable. But you don't need to trash George's entire existence online for making a move on your favorite player that she was preparing to do herself to him. Trust me. You'll have so many other people to target. If you really wanted to act bold and come for someone online, reality TV has produced a lot of not great people. Go bother them. Not George in this case. Thank you. Mwah. back to the review. But rightfully so, Liz is obviously pissed. I mean, she literally just lost half of the shiz. So obviously she's going to lie to George and say that she's still with him. And he's not going to believe her. Oh, what? George fully believes that Liz is still with him? Liz is kind of still fully with George? Okay then, whatever. Simon takes the car reward, and I'll get to Simon eventually in depth, but this was a really good moment for Simon that I love to watch. That, along with the little immunity streak our little guy was going on, was a lot of fun to watch for an underdog, especially knowing the story that the car was worth more than he made all of last year. But to the actual vote, it's pretty simple. Haley convinces the group it's smarter to just split the vote onto Simon and Sean, with Nino winning immunity here, sending home Simon. It's pretty easy. Moving on. I mean, it makes it even more comical when Simon pushes a plan to take down Matt. Ooh, so scary. But literally nobody hops on board, and he is ready to go. And unfortunately, we're going to say goodbye to our beloved friend Simon. But wait, what? Who flipped? It must have been Nina. God damn it, Nina. Nina always foiling the plan. But wait, no. It's right. Nina voted for Simon. So who the Haley? Miss Haley Leak herself? Oh my God, queen shit. She did that. Like, I don't know. This episode was just a lot of fun to me. George's first time not knowing what the vote result was going to be, literally everyone being blindsided at Tribal except for Haley, George's incorrect read and ridicule of Nina thinking that she flipped the vote, only to be so wrong, was all so good, and such a fun blindside to see the end of Big Sean here. It's really unfortunate, though, that Haley gets exposed instantly after this move happens. During George's Nina barrage, Nina is able to finally convince George that Haley is the true snake here, as earlier in the season, George only told Haley about the $60,000 that he won to test Haley if he can trust him. And when he found out that Haley exposed that, it was over, done, finito, it's curtains for Haley. And that's my only true complaint about this season. I think it gets very stagnant towards the end game of the season here. The villains have won the war. The vigilantes have dethroned the former heroes and Simon. And it was just a matter of picking them off one by one, which they did. And I'm not necessarily complaining because my rooting interest is within the villains, but it's still not entertaining television to watch Haley, the only winner on the cast, get blindsided in a vote in which I knew the entire time she was gonna go home. It was way too obvious to me, and not that grand downfall I was hoping it would be for our only winner on the season. And the same thing for the Simon vote out the very next week. Simon loses immunity by literally a second. The outsiders try to convince Matt and Jerry to flip on George. Matt and Jerry don't flip on George, and Simon goes home on the split vote. There was something there, or should I say lack of something there, that just kind of fizzled out all the spark that this George versus Simon war was brewing, to the point where Simon was fighting blindfolded with both arms and hands tied behind his back, just going out in kind of a stinker. But I'm not about to miss this opportunity to talk about how amazing Simon was on this season. Our very own bumbling, wide-eyed buffoon had me convinced he was the winner in episode 1, and I was very disappointed. Another boring and predictable strong male archetype winner, but as his story and his power deteriorates, and he continues to fail and blunder, he became so much more likable because of it. This man just kept trying, idea after idea, blunder after blunder. Dodo music on top of dodo music. He was always given the short end of the stick from the jump, but he kept pushing and he never stopped smiling, which is what I love so much about Simon. He's great TV, he's a great person, he was a great underdog this season, and I'm not even wishing anymore. I expect to see Simon back for another season, and I expect him to do really well whenever he does. This was such a fun season for Simon, who could have been the main character if it wasn't for some bloke from Bankstown. So, never change, Simon. Never change. And it continues to become stagnant. All of a sudden, George is found in the power position between his alliance with Matt and Jerry and his jacuzzi alliance with Liz and Nina. Nina was just a little too threatening for her own good and is taken out, unfortunately. Nino this season was great. She has that twine blood in her, and you can just tell she is naturally gifted at this game and could have easily won if Matt and Jerry weren't literal puppets. It's unfortunate we didn't get to see as much of Nina as I would have loved to, and due to her edit, I knew she wasn't winning for a long time this season. Despite all that, she was one of my favorite people to watch from this season, and good on Australian Survivor for stealing such an icon from the US graphs. Win for the Aussies here. And even after a very lackluster penultimate episode revealing that it's a final three and the jury removal twist robbing us of Shawnee in the end, I was still very excited for this finale because I literally had no idea who was about to win. And I can say I left my watch very satisfied with the coronation of this season. I mean, shout out Kara for literally being George's loved one. That is just the most George thing I've ever witnessed, and I love it so much. Jumping into an epic immunity challenge, do or die for Liz here. And in a season where Liz has been defined by sinking or swimming, she does what she's been doing all season and rises up and wins a clutch immunity, giving her a seat in the final tribal, setting up the three boys who seemed inseparable to finally have to turn on each other. And despite Jerry's best efforts to throw himself overboard, this was always going to lead to one thing, and one thing only: the end, the dethroning of the king. Survivor wasn't even going to hide it. We all knew it. The players knew it. There was no other option than to vote out George here, the star of the season, leaving him just short of winning it all once again. And there's something that I really enjoy about the perceived pawns of George throughout the season, being the only people who were ever able to vote out the king in the end. Of course, I won't move on to Final Tribal without acknowledging the impact and the joy that was George on this season for me. This truly was the season of George. From beginning until his end, he was the main character, and he will be the main character when we look back onto the season. Hell, he's literally the thumbnail, for crying out loud. This was George's season, and whether you love him or you hate him, you cannot downplay his impact he has every second he's on the screen. He's amazing television, and production knows that, and that's why he ate up all the screen time. He's made for this. And not only that, he's obviously an amazing player to go along with that. He understands how this game is played. He understands the ins and outs and grabs the game by the balls. He's said it many times this season. He loves looking down the barrel of defeat, because if you aren't doing that, then you aren't built to win this game. But even in that same sentiment, I don't know if George is actually built to win this game. I mean, yeah, he's had two insanely deep and insanely dominant runs, but his incapability to win a challenge might just be his only downfall, because he will never get taken to the end, except for that one time, but that's kind of a unique circumstance, whatever. I expect to see George on another season again, and he'll hog up the screen time one more time. Even so, in what world can George ever win? I find it very hard to find that world, find that reality, despite him still being one of the best to ever play in Australian Survivor history. Even so, as someone who obviously wasn't spoiled on the season down the road, early on I was just praying that George would make it just one more round, just one more episode we could see George on our screen. Even going into the season, I very much expected George to be a pre-merge boot, and he'd be lucky if he survived the first 2 weeks of this show. But week in and week out, episode in and episode out, George survived. And not only that, but George thrived. And even though he fell just short of his crown, I truly do believe that this was the best possible outcome for the season for me personally. Seeing such a dominant game fall just short by his underlings, that was the story I was hoping for to be told. And I was very satisfied when it came into reality. That was the end of King George, and hopefully that won't be the last I ever talk about George on this channel, because I do expect him to be on another season sometime soon. But I mean, we have a whole ass final three to go over, and I'll keep this one short and sweet, at least the best I can, because there's one person I truly want to talk about here, and it's Liz. Liz, who coming into Final Tribal I was very nervous for. Matt feels like just such a likable guy, and everyone always smiles when he talks, that I thought Liz's bluntness was gonna catch up to her, but she gave such an amazing final tribal council speech to the point where her eventual unanimous win was absolutely deserved and completely satisfying to represent the season as the winner of Australian Survivor Heroes vs. Villains. The Shiz were as amazing as you could imagine, and Liz being able to win was the next best thing to a Shawnee win, which is what I was really hoping for, but this was such a great consolation prize. Liz, though being unfortunately under-edited for the likes of George, Simon, and even Nina towards the end, she was so good, and her presence was felt throughout the season without needing a billion confessionals to hog up the screen, and that's very hard to do. Very few people are able to make such a strong impact without being given to express their thoughts and feelings to the audience, but damn it, I might say Liz is the best to ever accomplish that feat. And if it's the landing that counts, Liz may not be the best winner ever, but she was absolutely the most satisfying. And her finally getting her one-up on George, whispering to George on his way out that she finally got him, and then standing tall and proud at Final Tribal Council to a unanimous win? Give me that any day of the week, and it makes up for what was a pretty sad endgame that got stale. And as far as the other two finalists go, I don't want to completely disregard them, but I'ma mostly disregard them. Goats that literally just got dragged to the end. Matt was pretty likable and had some funny moments, but they played the game that isn't fun TV and lost unanimously as they should. Although, I will say, if this season was a final two like most people thought, I think Matt is the winner of this season. So I'm not blaming Matt for his passive gameplay because he was lining himself up for a final two win, but that's none of my business. That's not what happened, and we gotta move on. And that's gonna do it. That was Australian Survivor Heroes vs. Villains. Again, this season was a lot of fun and easily a top 3 favorite Australian Survivor season with potential to be my number 1. Even if the pre-merge, in my opinion, was 10 times better than the post-merge, that was an all-time pre-merge in my eyes, and most things won't be nearly as good as that. So, to go along with a satisfying downfall and satisfying conclusion and winner, I think this season will be fondly remembered in the history of Survivor for years to come. And if you guys made it this far into the video, just thank you. That really does mean a lot to listen to this entire thing and get to this point. I have plenty of videos and reviews coming very soon, including talking about another show coming back very, very soon. But you'll have to wait to see what it is. Until next time, bye-bye.